welcome back to another episode of the TundraCast. And today we got another very special guest on with us today on the podcast. Bit of a contrast to the last one, which of course we had Josh Yo, Penguins writer. Today we have Anthony SanFilippo, who writes for Crossing Broad on the Philadelphia Flyers. I'm going to start it off. So obviously you work at Crossing Broad. How did you start your journey? Like, how did you get there?
Well, I've been covering the team. I've been covering hockey for 21 years now. I actually started as a sports writer in Philadelphia with the Associated Press. My first assignment was covering the Philadelphia Eagles back in the late 90s. They were terrible. It was the last year of Ray Rhodes as coach. They were 3-13. It was just really just a bad year. But I eventually started to do some freelance work for hockey and for a variety of different outlets. And then I was hired by a newspaper. And when the job came open for the beat writer at the newspaper, I applied for it and said, "Listen," I said, "you're not going to find anybody else here in the building who can cover hockey. I've already been doing it for 4 years." And so they basically just gave me the job. And so I was the beat writer at that newspaper, which was the Delaware County Times, from 2004 through 2012. And then I actually went to work for the team for a couple of years. The team hired me away from the newspaper to run their website. And for 2 years, I was the lead reporter for the Philadelphia Flyers website, philadelphiaflyers.com. After there was a merger with the ownership of the team, the Comcast, I think you guys know Comcast pretty well. Comcast owns the Flyers, and so they merged with NBC. That's how we end up with now the NBC SN. But when NBC came in, they decided that they didn't need a separate department for the website. They decided it should be just a function of public relations. So they laid off our entire department. So I was no longer with the Flyers. And then after that, I took like a year off of covering hockey. And then in 2017, Crossing Broad expanded and decided to add beat writers to their list, and they reached out and said, "Yeah, we'd love to bring you on board. You've been covering this team for so long." And I said, "Sure." And I've been there since 2017. So long journey, a lot of hockey in my day. I've been all over North America watching the sport, but it's been fun. It's a fun journey, and it's a fun sport to cover.
So do you have any people that were a really big part of what you did when you got to getting here?
It's funny. When I broke into the business, I never went to school for journalism. I went to college. I was a theater major, guys. And I know, right? Go figure. So I never wrote for the school newspaper. I never took a journalism class. There's a guy who's the national football writer for the Associated Press now. His name is Rob Motti. And I met Rob working at a radio station. And he said to me, he's like, you know a lot about sports. And I'm like, yeah. And he said, you should come work for me at the Associated Press. I said, I've never written anything. He says, just write like you're having a conversation with your buddies at the bar. And so I did, and not knowing what the parameters are for writing, the inverted triangle and everything else, the most important information at the top, least important information at the bottom. I knew none of that. And so I just wrote like I was having a conversation. And it was considered at the time, everybody does it now, but at the time it was considered a very unique style of writing. And it carried me, man. It got me through. Everybody wanted to hire me because I had this unique voice in Philadelphia that nobody else had. And then I was trying to always stay a step ahead. So I was the first beat reporter to be on Twitter back in 2009. And then of course everybody else started doing it, and then I started. We try and be creative. We do nowadays. We came up with, we're doing a show from Press Row. No one's ever done this before, but we sit there and put a camera on and set up our microphones, and we do a pregame show and an in between period show online live that no one else does. And so we always try and say, what can we do? What can we always do that be a little bit ahead of everybody else? because everybody writes the way I write now, so it's not unique anymore. But so I got to find something that I do that's unique. So I always try and do that. So once everybody starts doing press row shows, I'm going to have to come up with something else new.
So do you have something that you are trying to work on now that pushes forward the industry?
No, we right now. I mean, I think that this is kind of unique. This press row show thing. I mean, we offer something that between periods you're usually stuck watching the home broadcast between periods show, which unless it's a national game. And I got to imagine that in every city, they're pretty terrible, right? I mean, you got some local people just sitting there rehashing the goals and saying the same thing every time you watch. And so what we want to do is we offer it as an opportunity, where we're going to offer some opinion. Obviously, we're down there, we're at the games, and we talk to the coaches and the players. So we're giving some informed opinions. But it's more than anything, it's an opportunity for fans to interact with us and to talk to us and to give us comments and ask us questions. And so we make the fans a part of it. And I think that that interactive in-game experience is something that's not being done anywhere else. And the sooner that kind of takes off and people start watching, and we're watching our numbers grow each time we do it, I think that's the thing that's going to eventually catch on. And I'm not smart enough to know what the next thing is after that, after everybody else starts doing it. But for now, I think this is a pretty cool thing that we tried out at Crossing Broad.
I think Pat's got the next question.
Yeah, so as you probably know, Carter Hart in the last couple of games, he's not been doing so great. Like he's given up around 15 goals in the last 4 games.
Yep.
Are there any possible contributions to or factors that we aren't seeing that is affecting his play?
I would say, first of all, I mean, and it's a good question, Pat, because it's really it's getting national attention in the last several games, but it's actually been something that's been going on most of the season. And I would say that the biggest problem that Carter has faced is, he didn't have a typical offseason, obviously because of COVID and everything else. So what ended up happening was he had a shortened off season because the playoffs ended in September, and then all of a sudden here we are, it's December and we're back in camp again. So he only worked for a couple of months back home in Alberta. And when he was there, he was working with a personal goaltending coach, a guy by the name of Dustin Schwartz. Dustin Schwartz used to be just a junior hockey goalie coach. Now has been hired by the Edmonton Oilers since then. But he was working out with Dustin Schwartz and trying to make a couple of changes to his game. And I think that the changes that he worked on this past off season were probably not the best ones. And that's what's created certain spots for teams to be shooting at him. If you watch his games, a lot of the goals he gives up are high glove or just to the short side. He's just slow reacting. He doesn't get over from post to post really quick because he's trying this new thing called a spread. That's something that goalies are doing now to try and get move faster across the blue paint. And he's just not accomplishing that. And so what's end up happening is that because the season is so condensed and they're playing basically every other night and they get one practice every 2 weeks, there really hasn't been an opportunity for him to work on that. That's something that a goalie can't fix in a game. He's got to work on that in practices. So what the Flyers have finally decided to do is what, we're just going to shut him down for a little bit, let him work in practice, let him work with the goalie coach, see if we can't get him back to doing the things that he was doing last year. And if Brian Elliott has to play a few games, or even if Alex Lyon, who's the third string goalie, if he has to get into a game here over the next couple of days, that fine, then so be it. But the Flyers really just need to get Carter Hart right, because if they can't get him right, they're not going to be a competitive team. You need to have a goalie that's going at the top of his game if you want to have a chance to win the Stanley Cup. And the Flyers won't be there; they won't even be in the playoffs if Carter Hart can't get his act together.
Yeah, and it's just especially important with Carter Hart because he's only 22. He's got a really bright future ahead of him. A lot of Vezinas, a lot of people think. So I guess you're right. They definitely have to get it right.
Well, I think that the thing with him being so young is, if you go back and look at goalies who've had success that he's had at this point in their career, they've all had this similar letdown. And you go back and look. I mean, Carey Price with the Canadians when he was 22, he was a mess. That was in 2010, and he lost the starting job to Jaro Halak, and it was Halak who carried the Canadians to the Eastern Conference Finals when they lost to the Flyers, who eventually lost to the Blackhawks in the Stanley Cup. But it was Halak, not Price. And Price was the top-end goalie that everyone was talking about, going to be this next great goalie, next great Vezina winner. He had that problem. If I take you guys back to probably before you were born in the 80s, Pelle Lindbergh won the Calder Trophy in 82-83 as the best rookie in the NHL. In 83-84, his second year as a goalie, he was so bad he got reassigned to the minor leagues, came back in 84-85 and won the Vezina Trophy. So, I mean, it happens. Goalies go through this. And so I'm pretty confident with an off season that Carter Hart will be fine. He'll be normal. He'll get back to what he was. I'm just not certain that it's something that he can fix in time for the Flyers to make the playoffs this year.
As we know from the news today, Shane Gostisbehere has been putting on waivers. He's been all right this season and, has taken a step up from the past couple of years. Is this just a cap move or is there something else going on in the background?
Well, I think that Gostisbehere has kind of worn out his time with the Flyers. He has been better this year, but that's when he was as bad as he was last year and even most of the season before, it's not that big of a step forward. He's really not great in his own end defensively. He's not been a very good defensive defenseman. So unless he's really contributing a lot offensively to cover up for the mistakes that go on in the defensive end, he's a net negative for them. So I know that GM Chuck Fletcher has tried for much of the past 2 seasons to trade Gostisbehere and has not been able to do it. Just hasn't been able to find that value. I think what the goal is here is to create some flexibility on the roster. Now, I don't think anybody's going to claim him. Look, if somebody does, I mean, I know there's been a report that maybe Florida would be interested. He's originally from that area. They just had Ekblad go down with that ankle injury. But I don't know if somebody wants to lock into another 2 years at $4.5 million for Shane Gostisbehere. I don't think he gets claimed. If that's the case, the Flyers now have the ability to kind of maneuver him around. They can put him on the taxi squad. They can send him down to the AHL. It gives them some room to add guys to their roster. So it's more of a housekeeping kind of move to try and make it so that they can do other things here in advance of the trade deadline and then maybe even at the deadline. But if he's claimed, if he's taken, the Flyers will accept that and sit there and say, hey, you know what we got in exchange? We got $4.5 million of cap space the next 2 years when the salary cap is going to be flat because of COVID. So I think that they look at that as a win-win situation for them, no matter what the outcome is.
Yeah, so you mentioned that flat cap. How is that going to affect the Flyers?
Well, right now they're in a better shape than a lot of teams are. They're not right up against it. I mean, they don't have a ton of room, but they have a little bit of room. And when you look moving forward, it depends, I think, what happens with the expansion draft next year with Seattle. Who from the Flyers roster will they take? Will they take a bigger contract like a James Van Riemsdyk or a Jake Voracek and really give the Flyers a lot of space? Or do they take somebody that's, doesn't make nearly as much money? So it's really going to be interesting to see how that plays out. But I think that the Flyers find themselves probably in better position than most teams that want to be competitive. Usually the teams that have a lot of cap space are teams that are rebuilding, teams that are, your Detroits, your Ottawas, your LA, the teams that are just trying to start over and get, they won't be good for another few years. The Flyers tend to be one of those teams that, are in the middle trying to get into that next group who can compete for the Stanley Cup. And if they have that room and have some space to add some talent that will be available either through trade or through free agency, I think that they'll be in better shape than most teams would next year.
Okay, so you mentioned about Ghost and Florida making a lot of sense. So let's say he doesn't. Let's say he gets claimed, but he doesn't go there. Where do you think he goes?
There's not a lot of places that I think really make sense. I mean, Boston's another one. I know that they're kind of looking for a defenseman. Chicago is looking for a defenseman, but I don't know that, Boston, I think that they've seen enough of him playing against him this year, right? That maybe that they'll sit there and say, yeah, maybe we can go in another direction. He does add, I mean, if you need to bolster the power play, he helps. The things he does really well is he keeps the puck in at the point. He's got a big slap shot from up there. He's willing to jump up into the play, especially along the half wall. He's not afraid to throw the puck in front of the net, and create havoc. So there's some things he does really well, but he also doesn't make the smartest decisions. Sometimes he gets over aggressive and it leads to an odd man rush in the other direction. The Flyers have given up more odd man chances this season than any team in the NHL. And not to say that Shane Gostisbehere is responsible for all of them, but he has been responsible for his share. And he also sometimes makes a pass in his own zone that puts his partner in a bad spot. And so you look at it and say, well, the other guy made the turnover. Yeah, but if he would have just gone up the wall with the puck or skated it out himself, you wouldn't have put his partner in that position. So those are some of the things that are his negatives. And so it really kind of depends on what team is what they're willing to take. If they're saying, okay, well, we'll take a couple of those mistakes because we need the help on the power play, and he will help our power play, or are they going to sit there and shy away because, man, come playoff time, every mistake is crucial, and we can't have this guy making mistakes for us in the playoffs. So it'll be interesting to see. But I think those are the teams that make the most sense to me, at least off the top. I mean, the one other option that I guess nobody's really talking about is you look at a team like Detroit, for example, who's got a ton of cap space. They're kind of rebuilding. And maybe they look at it and say, hey, we'll take a chance on this guy, see if he is one of those players who needs just a change of scenery, and then he returns back to being the player he was a couple of years ago. And then he's affordable at $4.5 million for 2 years because they have all that room, and then he's part of the rebuild. So I think that's a potential possibility, but I don't know. I don't think the Flyers would have put him on waivers if they felt that a team was really going to take that contract.
Okay, so yeah, you mentioned the expansion draft and JVR as one of those big contracts. Like you said, I don't think anyone in the Flyers organization would be too mad about that contract being taken, but at the same time, JVR has been having a really good season so far.
Mm-hmm. No, he's been great. I mean, he's their leading scorer. He's tailed off a little bit here in the last week or two, but he's really still a very reliable player. He's a smart player, and I'll be honest. If the Flyers kind of fall out of contention here and become a team that has to be a seller at the trade deadline, I wouldn't be surprised if a team took a chance on JVR this year and not have Flyers don't have to wait until the deadline. Maybe the Flyers eat a little bit of the salary and to get a little better return. But I can't see. I mean, I can't see JVR being part of the Flyers organization next year. I think this is he's a sell high kind of guy. So I think they're gonna, if they're not contending, if they're going to be sellers, I think that's going to be a guy that they're going to push out there on people. And if they don't sell and they have to wait till the off season, I think that they'll look to move that contract to try and create a little bit more flexibility to bring in the kind of players that they're going to need, because they're going to need to make some changes on defense, a little bit of depth. Their third line is not as good as it could be. So I think that there's going to be some changes that are going to come in those places. And I think if you can find a way to move JVR's contract to help bolster that, it would be for the team's benefit.
So last night, the Flyers, they had a really intense game against the Sabres. They were down 3-0, and they managed to complete the comeback. Surely the Flyers, they must have been very nervous because they didn't want to be that team that would lose to the Sabres, who were on a winless streak. So can you give us some insight on what the atmosphere was like in that game?
Yeah, it's kind of crazy, Pat, because I'll tell you that they never thought that they would have to be in that spot against that team. The Flyers are a significantly better team than Buffalo. but things have been going so badly for the Flyers that that's kind of what happens, right? I mean, you find yourself in a bad spot after playing 40 minutes of not really caring. And the thing of it is that if you go back to Saturday, the Sabres played a really good game against the Bruins and almost beat Boston on Saturday. And so the Flyers should have known, like the Sabres don't want to be this record-setting team. They don't want to be known as this team that, lost 19 straight games. They want to stop this. They want to get a win. And so they're at that point of this streak where it's like they're going to play hard. They may not be talented, but they're going to play hard every game. And I think that the Flyers kind of were caught by surprise by that for a couple periods. And they were not. They weren't happy even after the game when they won, even after winning. They were kind of miserable about what just took place. But what happened in the third period is Coach Alain Vigneault shortened the bench. He didn't play three guys. He didn't play Oskar Lindblom, Nolan Patrick, or Joel Farabee, who is the leading goal scorer. Sat three young players and basically looked at the veterans and said, "Hey guys, you told us that this wouldn't happen. You told us the team would respond well, against this Sabres team. We're down 3-0. It's a must-win game. You guys got to go out and do it." And darn if they didn't. Kevin Hayes got that first goal, then Giroux, then Couturier, and then Provorov scores the goal in overtime. So it's like the leaders of the team carried them in the third period, but they had to. Because if not, if they would have lost that game last night, they would be officially done at this point. Even though they would have only been 3 points out, you might as well just have packed it in at that point because you cannot lose to this team. And they're going to play the Sabres again tomorrow. And the Sabres are going to come out and play hard again tomorrow. I got to think that the Flyers will be a little bit more ready this time.
Yeah.
But you never know, guys. You never know.
Yep, it's hockey. But yeah, you mentioned Alain Vigneault. He obviously had a really, I would say that his 2020 was successful last season. So do you think he's built on that somehow, or is it just gone downhill a bit?
I wouldn't put any of this on the coach, really. I mean, I know it's easy when things go bad to start pointing fingers, right? Who's the blame for things going wrong? But if you look at the mistakes that the Flyers are making, they are so egregious. They're so out of left field that for a fact this is not the system that is being taught to them by the coaches. I highlighted in my post on Crossing Broad today 2 of the goals that the Sabres scored. And in one of them, they have 5 guys. All 5 guys are between the dot and the half wall. You can't have 5 guys on the same side of the ice. Somebody's going to be open on the other side. They certainly aren't teaching that. The coaches aren't teaching that. And then there was another one that I put up where all 5 guys, the defenseman from Nashville, he's got a big term left on his contract. He's got 6 years left. But I think Nashville is kind of motivated to rebuild at this point. And the Flyers, I think, are motivated to spend a little bit to fix the defense because they need to find a partner long term for Ivan Provorov. They can't just keep piecemealing it. So I think that's the one that kind of makes the most sense. But I'll tell you another thing, and we talked about Carter Hart earlier. I think that the Flyers are considering trying to add another veteran goalie just to kind of let Carter take a break. Shut it down as far as playing in games. Not worry about playing games, but just worry about fixing his mechanics and let Brian Elliott and another veteran alternate and kind of be those guys. I think somebody like Jonathan Bernier from Detroit makes a lot of sense for them in that regard. So those are kind of the 2 moves that I think that you're going to see the Flyers kind of go for. And I think that they might be moves that they go for whether they're all in or not. I think it's enough to say, how can we make our team better next year and still be a competitive team this year? And I think that those are the moves that would make the most sense.
Right.
So obviously the Flyers have, like you said, we all know that they've struggled a lot this year. We were expecting them to be at the top of their division, somewhere around there. Maybe a lot of them thought top 3 in the league, that kind of thing. So they obviously have a really good core. That they want to be able to build around, but it's starting to get up there in age. So how much more time do you think this core is going to be around?
And that's a great question. I mean, I'll tell you one thing that I argue with Philadelphia fans on Twitter all the time is I think that they kind of missed they kind of missed where they were supposed to be with this core. I think that, when Ron Hextall was the GM prior to Chuck Fletcher, and he's now with the Penguins, I think that he was trying to drag things out a little bit longer and let guys develop a little bit longer. But I think he was missing the best seasons for Giroux and Voracek, specifically those two guys. And they brought JVR back, and aside from this season, he's not a guy. He's on the back end of his career at this point. He was drafted in 2007. Couturier is your number one guy at this point, and that's great. And he's still 26, and so he's still young enough. But even bringing in like a Kevin Hayes, last year, it was like, okay, this is more of a veteran leadership group than you would think for a team that's got such young talent. Maybe the young talent isn't as good as they thought they were. Ivan Provorov is really good player. Maybe he's not a number one. Maybe he's a number two defenseman, right? Travis Sanheim, decent defenseman, but maybe he's more of a 3-4, and they thought he was going to be a top pair guy. Phil Myers took a step back. They thought he was going to be more. They gave him a big contract in the offseason, and he's kind of taken a step back defensively. Nolan Patrick, I know he missed the last 2 years with his headaches, his migraine condition, but it's looking more and more likely that was the wrong pick at number 2 overall in 2017, when guys like Miro Heiskanen and Cale Makar are as talented as they are at such a young age in the NHL. There was a bad break with Oskar Lindblom having cancer, and having to beat that and come back, which is an inspirational story. But at the same time, it's been really hard for him to get back to the level he was at before his diagnosis. So there's a lot of guys in that middle ground where you kind of thought they were going to be better, and they're not quite what you thought. Of course, we've talked about Carter Hart. He also fits into that mold too. So maybe the group that Hextall drafted between 2014 and 2017, there's 9 guys in there that are on this roster. Yeah, maybe they're just okay and not next level. And when you have the veterans like Giroux and Voracek and JVR kind of starting to be on the downside, maybe that's why it's not lining up properly for the Flyers at this point.
So yeah, we've been over that a lot. Their struggles. So is it anywhere near the point where they might have to start selling at the deadline?
They might. I mean, they might have to. I don't think it would be an overly ambitious sell. I think that last I was told is give it a week. Let's see where they're at a week from now, because they'll have played Buffalo again. They have a game against the Islanders on Saturday, and then they play 2 games back to back next week against Boston. And that's what I keep telling people. That's their Waterloo, right? That's their tipping point. Mm-hmm. If they can come through these 4 games and be in good shape and either be ahead of Boston in the standings, or even still where they're at now, like a point out or 2 points out at the worst, they probably won't be sellers. They'll probably continue to be pushing for a playoff spot. But if they fall further back, I think then they will sell. And at that point, it's, what do you sell? You sell guys who are going to be free agents that you're not going to re-sign, and you try and move a contract that maybe is not one that will help you going forward. So that's why I think a guy like JVR could be on the list at that point if they become sellers. Scott Lawton, who's an unrestricted free agent after the season, and they haven't offered him a new contract yet. I think that he's a guy that could go. Michael Raffel, if somebody's looking for a depth forward, he could go. Even Brian Elliott, who's was only signed a 1-year deal. If somebody's looking for a good veteran backup goaltender, he's a guy that could go as well. So I think that there's some players in there, but I don't think it's anything where it's going to be burn down the roster, trade away your best players, and start from scratch. I don't think that's the case. I think it's more about just moving pieces that won't be here next year.
So the Flyers power play has struggled a lot, and that is Michel Therrien's job. If I think I'm right
you're right.
about that. Yeah. Yep. So I've seen a lot on Twitter, on Instagram, things like that he's come under a lot of fire. People say, obviously, like you said, the coaching staff, the mistakes the Flyers have been making are egregious, and that's not what the coaching staff wants at all. But the power play, do you kind of have to put that on Therrien a bit?
Yeah, I at least I would say yes. More so earlier in the season than recently. I mean, if you look at the last handful of games, they've actually started to score a little bit, and I think it's because they're putting Giroux and Voracek back out there more on the power play. Yeah. I mean, if nothing else, you can criticize Giroux and Voracek for anything and everything, but man, they're two of the better power play players in the NHL. And for a while there, Therrien had them on the second unit, which really didn't make any sense. I don't know why. I don't know why. I mean, why you would do that. I'm still not in love with the combinations that they have. Like I would put Giroux, Voracek, Van Riemsdyk, who's leads the team in power play goals. I would put them out there together with Farabee, who's got a sniper mentality. And I would have said Gostisbehere, who knows if he's going to be on the roster anymore. Yeah. But somebody at the point who can get a shot through to the net, whether it's Gostisbehere, Provorov, Sanheim, whoever. But that's what I would do. As of right now, they don't really have that together. They kind of mix and match certain guys, and it's been a little bit better. They're middle of the pack. I think they're 15th or 16th in the NHL at this point, which is right in the middle. So it's not awful. It was worse prior to the last few weeks. And at that point I was like, man, what are they doing? But now I think that maybe, getting Giroux and Voracek more ice time on the power play, you're starting to realize that those have got to be the guys that drive that ship. And as long as they're out there, I think that they'll at least be, league average, if not a little bit better than league average with that team, with that pairing on the ice.
So over the offseason, the NHL announced these new divisions. And with those new divisions, do you there's been mixed reactions with them? People seem to love them. People seem to hate them. What are your opinion on them?
I think that they did what they had to do. I mean, obviously, you had to have all the Canadian teams together for COVID purposes. So it really came down to how were you going to divide the remaining 24 teams in the U.S. I don't know. I just would have thought that it made more sense to keep Carolina with Washington than it would have been to throw another like a Buffalo or a Boston in. I don't know. I'm okay with it. I mean, I guess they did what they had to do. I just would have rather that they kept the East Coast teams just to the East Coast. I would have liked to see Tampa and Florida, although they're both really good. It would have probably been worse for the Flyers if it turned out that way. But in the division rather than Buffalo. Like Buffalo, to me, they're further west, even though not a lot, but they're further west than a lot of the teams that the Flyers play. They should have been in that division with Columbus and all those guys. They're okay. I don't think that they're going to last. I think we're going to, that's obviously going to go back to what it was before or something close to what it was before. But, I think the NHL has done a nice job dealing with COVID, starting with the bubble last year. And they've had a lot of problems this year with, teams having to go on pause. Flyers, of course, were one of them. And they've done about as good a job as they could rescheduling as many games as they've had to reschedule this year and still be able to get it all in within the same time frame. I think they only extended the season like 2 or 3 days beyond where it was originally just to get these games in. And it looks like that they're going to be able to make it happen and still get the playoffs done in time for the Olympics to start in July. So I give them a lot of credit. I don't love the divisions. I don't hate them. I think a couple of teams are going to get an easier path to the semifinals than they might have had before. I don't think that Canadian division's all that good. So I think a team like Toronto or Winnipeg might actually reach the Final Four a little bit undeservingly because the other divisions are so much tougher. But at the same time, I can't fault them for putting together the divisions the way they did.
So, speaking about the NHL in general, who or what has been the biggest surprise to you?
The Blackhawks. There's no doubt that Chicago has been the biggest surprise. and maybe we should have saw it coming because of how well they played in the bubble, right? I mean, they were a pretty solid team, competitive and pretty competitive in the bubble. Maybe they were a lot closer than a lot of people thought to getting it turned around. I mean, there were so many people who were saying last year that maybe they should just blow it up. Maybe they should look to find a new home for guys like Taves and Kane and the like. And it's like, you know what? Yeah, they've kind of gotten this thing turned around pretty well. I got to give them a lot of credit. So I think they're the surprise team as far as being good in the NHL this year. I got to tell you though, what happened as far as the other way, if you look in the other direction, I know we talked about Buffalo earlier. Man, they were a team that thought they were going to compete. Yeah, I mean, they went out and signed Taylor Hall, right? And they had veterans like Eric Stahl, who has now been traded to Montreal. You had Jack Eichel, who's one of the top young players in the league. They built a defense, and they thought that they had the right goalies in place, and they really liked their coach, and then they just went into total free fall, and have been an embarrassment. And so I think that they're the biggest surprise the other way, because they were kind of like a sexy pick to be a playoff team. Or compete for a playoff spot, and it turns out that they're the worst team in hockey. So I look at it and I'll say Chicago is probably the biggest surprise one way. And although the Flyers fans would be mad at me for not saying Flyers are the most disappointing team, I think Buffalo ends up being a little bit more disappointing.
Tough crowd in Philly, huh?
Please. I feel like I have to take a shower after every game because of my interactions on Twitter.
Yeah, that's Twitter, though.
Absolutely.
So obviously we're still on the topic of just the general NHL. Do you have a cup favorite just at this point?
At the beginning of the year, when you put your predictions out, I thought Colorado was the team that was poised to be, the next team to make that deep run. And I still think that they could. I still think that they're a really quality team that could do it. But man, Vegas has impressed me a lot. Yep. Vegas looks really, really good. I don't know if any team can beat them in a 7-game series. So I would have to say Vegas is my favorite to go. We don't know how they're going to match up in the semifinals, right? Because it's going to be based off of your regular season record. So it's not like two divisions and then there's no conferences this year. So you could end up playing, two traditional Western Conference teams could end up playing in the final, or two traditional Eastern Conference teams for that matter. Washington has been a little bit of a surprise to me in the sense that, I knew they were going to be good, but they've been better than I thought they were going to be. I thought that they were going to take a little bit of a hit on the blue line, but they haven't. And they're having a really good year with Ovi just being okay. Right? If you look at Ovechkin's numbers, he's not at the top of the league, right? He's kind of in the middle of the pack at this point. And they're still, the best team in the division record-wise. So they've surprised me a little bit in that regard. So I'm going to tell you that I think that your Stanley Cup final is Vegas and Washington, with Vegas coming out on top.
What other teams do you enjoy watching other than the Flyers?
Well, I've always, and maybe this is part of, my relationship with Craig Berube, but I love watching the way the Blues play. It's just a little bit more of an old school game. I kind of miss that kind of style. I don't know if you guys remember it at all, but man, when I was watching hockey growing up, it was a harder game to play, but it was more fun. It was more physical. And I don't mean fighting. Yes, there was fighting, but that's not what I mean by physical. I mean that the game was physical. It wasn't just about poking pucks off of sticks. It was about you took the guy and you rode him into the boards, and that's how you got the puck back, right? So the game was better that way than it is now. And I know people say, "Oh man, you're just an old fuddy-duddy when you say stuff like that." But the truth. But seriously, that's the game that I remember. And there's very few teams that play that way. So the Blues are certainly one because he's Berube's a throwback kind of coach. I think Boston plays that way a little bit. Maybe not as much this year as they did last year. But so I like watching Boston play that way as well. But boy, again, I mean, how can you not enjoy watching Vegas the way they play? I mean, they're just a legit puck possession team. You can't take the puck away from them. They're dangerous every time they have it on their stick. So when you look at that, and you say that's in today's game, that's the best talent, and you always want to watch the best talent. And individually, the best talent's going to be your Connor McDavids, right, of the world. But at the same time, when you want to watch the best team talent in today's game, it's Vegas, and I don't think it's close. I mean, Tampa, I guess, is probably the closest to them, but they're having a little bit of a championship hangover. Not much. They're still really good, but they got some competition in that division this year. Carolina and Florida are both hungry. I mean, Ekblad getting hurts Florida's chances a lot, but I'll tell you, I think Carolina is a team that could make some noise too. That was the other team I was debating between them and Washington as to who would be in the final against Vegas. I think Carolina's got a real chance too. I just like the veteran players on Washington just a little bit more than the upstarts in Carolina. So that's why I picked the Caps. But I mean, so they're a fun team to watch too. Again, coached by a former Flyer and Rod Brindamore. So yeah, I mean, those are the teams that I kind of like watching when I'm not watching the Flyers play hockey.
One of the, like you mentioned before, you like the toughness game, like the bit of rock'em sock'em. I think it's kind of gotten back to that a bit this year more than others. I don't know if it's because of the hate more between the teams because they're playing so much against each other. Do you think that, or?
I do think that you got a little bit of it. I think you get a little bit more animosity. And you get a little bit more after the whistle stuff that's happening now. I just don't think that the game is played the same way, and I think that's where I think it's lacking. So yeah, it's fun. The whistles blow, and you see guys pushing and shoving each other, and a couple punches are thrown, and you see people are cursing at each other, and that's fun too, right? I mean, that's part of hockey, the hockey lure as well. I just think in game, it's not. It's more cheap shots, and I hate the fact that there's cheap shots in hockey. I think it just used to be you make a really good, solid hockey hit, and that was the way the game was played. And I'm telling you, when the game was played that way, it was more exciting. It was more edge of your seat because you anticipated the hits as much as you anticipated the shots and the goals. So it really kept you engrossed in the game. Now I find there are times where the game just kind of skates by, right? Like nobody's scoring, and it's just kind of like, okay, so what's happening? Like, why is nothing happening? Right? So it's like hypnotic in a lot of ways. Back then, you had some, even if the teams weren't scoring, something might happen on the ice, which was really cool. And so that's why and again, it's my generation. Of course, I'm going to say that, but at the same time, I wish that the younger generation of fans got to see hockey played that way. I think they would probably appreciate it a little bit more.
All right, so we've been going for a pretty decent amount of time now. I just wanted to end it off on, obviously, Oskar Lindblom. He had such an amazing journey back from when he obviously got cancer. How much did the Philadelphia fan base in general rally around that?
It was awesome. And I really wish he would have had an opportunity to return in front of real fan, like a real crowd. I mean, when we had the first game with fans earlier this month, and I think there was 2,800 people at the Wells Fargo Center. They gave him a nice applause, and he skated around and waved his hand and stuff, and that was nice. And you give them credit for trying, but there's just nothing like the roar of a standing ovation crowd that would have probably gone on for 5-6 minutes. That would have been really just something to take in. And maybe that'll happen eventually. Maybe once we're allowed to be back at full capacity crowds again in the fall or winter, it'll happen for Oskar again. But I'll tell you, last year when we first found out, and we were all kind of taken aback and shocked, and he's such a good kid, always available to talk to the media, and always has something good to say. So we're obviously rooting hard for him. And then the Oskar Strong t-shirts came out, and everybody had something purple that said, you know, I am Oscar Strong, or we are Oscar Strong. And it just kind of took over the city. And so it was really, really kind of cool thing. And then, of course, he comes back in the playoffs last year. You know, he beats cancer in 6 months, and he's able to come back and play 2 playoff games. Just really was an unreal scenario. I know he didn't win the Masterton Award last year. He was a finalist. I have to think he's going to be a finalist again this year. I have to think that, you know, when you look at it and say, not only did he come back from cancer, but he came back from cancer and played a full season the next season, right? Yeah. I mean, and he's still beating it. He's still, you know, his latest diagnosis is he's still cancer free. So like he's still beating cancer and playing a full season. I think that he's going to be a candidate for the Masterton again. I think he'll be a finalist for the Masterton again. And I really would be surprised if he doesn't finally win it this year. So it's been a great story. It's the one kind of bright spot that kind of exists in this otherwise kind of crazy, miserable Flyers season.
Yep. All right, Anthony, thank you so much for coming on. Did you have any closing thoughts before we left it off here?
Yeah, no, I appreciate you guys reaching out to me to talk Flyers. I always love talking about this team. It's like I said, it's been 21 years of covering them, and I wouldn't have done it this long or continue to do it if I didn't enjoy it, and I didn't enjoy talking about it. And so I really appreciate you guys taking the time to have me on your podcast.
All right, thank you so much, Anthony.
Yeah, thank you guys.
For everyone watching, we also have a live stream for the trade deadline. So I hope you guys all come along, and I hope you guys enjoy episode 19 of the TundraCast.